So I think that what the U.S. wants does matter to Israel. It may not be determinative.
Okay.
And so I would just caution with that. I think part of the Minister of Defense, Gallant, coming to Washington is a signal of the closeness of the relationship, the need to talk through, to take advice, or to hear advice and to hear counsel. But ultimately, you have a sovereign country that's going to do what it feels is in its best interest to defend itself. The relationship between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu is a different type of sticking point challenge. And I think that was reflected in Gallant's visit being put on hold by the Prime Minister.
Was his relationship may be overstated at the beginning of this conflict with Benjamin Netanyahu? Joe Biden used to talk about the strategy would be to hug Benjamin Netanyahu and hold him closer, to steal a phrase. Bob Woodward's reporting paints a picture of screaming, shouting matches on the phone between these two leaders. What was their relationship before it began to deteriorate?
So what I would say is, and I can't speak specifically to President Biden's relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I have been in the position to observe other presidents in their back and forth with Prime Minister Netanyahu, given the long term he has had, and in and out of government. But I definitely observed moments of deep irritation, sometimes buried, sometimes not, between the presidents for whom I worked and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I heard private comments made about the frustration, as well as sometimes some of that seeping out into their dialogues with one another. So aside from the veracity of Bob Woodward's reporting, which has not been verified, yes, I believe, it's not hard to understand that it's a contentious relationship. It's not the only relationship like that U.S. presidents have with foreign leaders at various points, and particularly ones where the countries have the closeness of relationship that the United States has with Israel.
Well, and certainly the closeness of that relationship was on full display when the U.S. aided Israel in defending against the hundreds of missiles Iran sent toward Israel last week. So it's the response we're still waiting for from Israel to that. What is your expectation about what form it actually will take? How escalatory a move Israel would be realistically considering?
Well, I listened closely to your description of what Defense Minister Gallant said, and he strikes me as having chosen his words with great care. And the equation in the region between what various countries, and Israel's not alone in this, see as necessary for deterrence, and yet so deterring your enemy, your adversary, and yet minimizing the degree of escalation of the conflict is a pretty precise calibration that can often go wrong. And I would expect that that is part of the discussions the United States is having with Israel, and also Israeli internal discussions. Defense Minister Gallant has not had the easiest time interacting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, nor has the entire defense establishment in Israel.
Well, Gallant went on to say that Israel saw that Iran's attack failed because they were not precise. Is it possible to impress your opponent without escalating in this case?
I think it's a definition of what escalation means and in which ways. There are a number of different ways of going at Iran, and so that's a hard question to answer, and it may be in the eye of the beholder or the eye of the
maybe why
perpetrator.
It hasn't happened yet?
I think there are a number of reasons why it hasn't happened. It's a tough call to make.
Sure.
And a question of timing and wanting to catch by surprise when the entire world's attention is on as well. So I think there are any number of factors. I wouldn't read too much into the length of time it's taken.
You just described all of this as being in the eye of the beholder. So it is also a question not just of how Israel is viewing the situation, but how Iran is likely to view these potentially different retaliatory actions and how Iran will respond. We frequently here at Bloomberg look at oil prices, look at the map of the Gulf and the amount of oil that is coming through the Strait of Hormuz, for example, each and every day, and question how realistically disruptive this could be to the global economy, depending on how Iran decides to make its next move. Would you expect that, especially this close to an American election, when authorities are telling us Iran is trying to be disruptive, how they would think about the potential economic impacts of their next move when it comes to global energy markets.
So Iran has its own domestic challenges on the
Sure.
economy as well. So there are a number of different factors that play in, as do how regional actors are going to respond other than Israel. I took note of the fact that the Iranian foreign minister, I believe today, is in Saudi Arabia meeting with the crown prince. So there are a lot of discussions with a lot of actors, including folks who do not have good relationships with one another. The Saudis and the Iranians are a good example of that. And a huge international aspect. The reason they're able to talk to each other is because China brokered a surprise deal about a year ago between the Saudis and the Iranians. So there are so many different factors at play, and you really have to look at who benefits and who assumes the costs, and that's a global picture, not just a regional picture.
Yoav Gallant said that they will not understand what happened and how it happened. Should we be thinking beyond a military response in this case? Could it be cyber? Could it be a diplomatic salvo that we didn't expect here that involves the U.S.? Maybe this is not simply a military response?
I think it's fair to assume it would not be solely a military response. I think even now in the calibrations going in, you see certainly diplomacy hard at work.
Yeah.
And there are a number of economic tools or kinetic action that would affect the economy, as well as Israel's history on cyber actions within Iran.
For them to not know how it happened suggests something other than a ballistic missile, doesn't it?
It certainly raises questions, and I assume if he was making that statement publicly, he wanted people to be thinking along some of the lines that you're suggesting.
Well, it also brings my mind to, say, pagers and walkie-talkies suddenly
also true.
Exploding in the hands of people in Lebanon, as we're still seeing that limited incursion into Lebanon underway. As we watch this relationship, there's still the battle being waged against Hezbollah as it continues to target Israel.
And the pagers and walkie-talkies are a great example of, because it wasn't just people in Lebanon, it was Hamas people in Lebanon, Hamas fighters, people who were affiliated with the organization. Those were the people. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Hezbollah fighters. Those were the people who had those pagers and walkie-talkies. And so it's an interesting illustration because it does fit Gallant's language, right, of precise. They won't know. They won't know how it happened. So I think he is consciously opening up a wide range of thoughts or concerns or fears for people.
We're waiting for a White House briefing to start here. How public should Joe Biden be about his motivations right now on a day when he's on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu? How much does he need to disclose here, assuming he wants to have another phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, part of maintaining a relationship with friends and adversaries alike goes to the opposite of what you guys want, which is full, which is as much public disclosure as possible, right? You have to constantly balance, as you would when you're having any kind of tough conversation with anyone in a personal relationship. If you go out and tell the world about it or complain to all your friends, you're unlikely to get them to move in the direction you want.
Especially if your friends do not corroborate what you're saying. And that's been a recurring scenario for Joe Biden. I just talked to Bibi. Here's the deal. And Netanyahu says, no, I never made that deal.
So there's definitely a tough call to be made as well. There's no shortage of tough calls in this situation with how much you say publicly to let people know there's progress being made when you know you have a somewhat unreliable interlocutor on the other side or someone who's making different calibrations about what they're going to say publicly and privately.
Yeah.